At 10:18 on a Saturday morning, a man straps a pressure washer into the back of his SUV because his driveway has started to look tired. He did not wake up planning to spend $340. He went out for screws, trash bags, and maybe a coffee. Then he walked past a display of gleaming machines lined up like grown-up toys for people who wanted their lives to feel more capable. The box promised power, control, clean lines, instant transformation. He imagined the spray cutting through months of dirt in bright, satisfying strips. He imagined himself becoming the kind of person who handled things. The purchase felt weirdly responsible. By Monday, the driveway looked better. By the next month, the machine was sitting in the garage behind an old cooler, a folded ladder, and a plastic bin labeled camping. By the next year, it had become something else entirely. Not a tool, a resident. That is how a lot of clutter begins. Not with madness, not with obvious recklessness, with a short burst of excitement attached to a temporary need, followed by a permanent object entering a long afterlife inside your home. That is why one of the smartest rules you can ever use around money, clutter, and lifestyle inflation is brutally simple: rent or borrow before you buy. It does not sound glamorous. It does not feel like a secret from a billionaire. It is not marketed with slick language because it does not help stores move inventory. But this one rule can save you from an astonishing number of bad purchases, because it forces a question modern consumer culture works very hard to keep hidden. Do you need ownership, or do you only need access for a little while? That distinction changes everything. Most people buy as if every useful thing deserves permanent residence in their life. That is a costly assumption. A thing can be useful once without deserving a place in your garage for 7 years. A thing can improve one weekend, one vacation, one party, one project, one season, without earning shelves, square footage, maintenance, and memory space. Yet consumer life keeps training people to solve temporary spikes in need with permanent acquisition. You need to clean the patio, so you buy the machine. You want to host one great dinner, so you buy the serving pieces, the extra chairs, the bar tools, the special platters, and the folding table you will not touch again until guilt makes eye contact with you in the closet. You think you might get into camping, so you buy the tent, the stove, the lantern, the cooler, the sleeping pad, the folding chairs, the headlamp, the waterproof bins, and suddenly you are the owner of an entire outdoor identity built on 2 nights of actual use. This is the hidden pattern. People often buy for peaks and store for valleys. They purchase for the most dramatic version of a need, then live with the object through long stretches when that need is nowhere to be found. That is expensive in ways far beyond the receipt. Ownership always has a second price. Sometimes a third, sometimes a fourth. The first price is what you pay at checkout. The second is storage. The third is maintenance. The fourth is attention. The fifth is opportunity cost, which is just a colder way of saying what that money never got the chance to become because it got trapped inside an object that now mostly collects dust. A borrowed item, by contrast, leaves your life when its usefulness leaves. That is what makes this rule so powerful. It protects you from converting short-term excitement into long-term obligation. And that is really what clutter is. Obligation that outlasted value. Midway through adulthood, a lot of people discover they are not living inside homes so much as maintaining personal museums of temporary enthusiasm. The pasta maker from the month they got serious about cooking from scratch. The projector from the backyard movie night era. The full set of power tools for a person who assembled one bookshelf and then retired from carpentry forever. The cake stand collection built around 3 holidays a year. The paddleboard bought during a burst of summer optimism and then stored like a plastic monument to what good weather once promised. These objects are not evil. That is important. The point is not to moralize ownership. The point is to get more honest about what ownership costs and when it actually makes sense. A lot of things feel reasonable in the moment because buying compresses time. It turns the decision into a snapshot. You see the possible benefit, the immediate excitement, the picture of yourself using it. You do not feel the future very clearly. You do not feel the shelf it will claim, the maintenance it may need, The move you will one day have to carry it through. The drawer it will crowd, the garage it will slowly thicken. The fact that you may spend years paying for the square footage required to store a phase of your life that lasted 11 days. Renting or borrowing stretches time back into the picture. That is the genius of it. It forces the object to prove itself in lived reality before it earns citizenship in your home. And lived reality is much harsher than imagination. Imagination is where many purchases look perfect. In imagination, the stand mixer means weekly baking. In imagination, the camera means a flourishing creative habit. In imagination, the camping gear means a more adventurous version of yourself. In imagination, the pickup truck means capability and freedom, even if what you actually need twice a year is not a truck, but access to one afternoon of hauling. This is why the rule works so well. Borrowing and renting are truth serum. They expose what using the thing is actually like. Is it annoying to set up? Heavier than expected? More specialized than the marketing suggested? Less transformative than the fantasy? And do you enjoy the result, but not the process? Does the object solve a problem you do not have often enough to justify storing it? Or does using it reveal something else entirely, something surprisingly important? Maybe you love it. Maybe it integrates beautifully into your real routine. Maybe it saves time often enough, improves life meaningfully enough, or gets used consistently enough that ownership suddenly becomes obvious and rational. That is good too. The rule is not anti-buying, it is anti-premature buying. This is where a lot of people misunderstand restraint. They think buying later means denying yourself. Often it means buying with far more confidence. It means the purchase has survived reality. Think about tools, because tools are where this rule can save absurd amounts of money and space. Now, most households do not need to own every machine they briefly admire. Pressure washers, carpet cleaners, tile saws, ladders beyond a certain size, post hole diggers, heavy-duty drills, specialty sanders, garden equipment for once-a-season jobs. These are classic trap purchases because the job feels urgent and ownership feels efficient. But a thing can be efficient for the task and inefficient for the life surrounding the task. Renting the tool for a day may be the most elegant answer imaginable. You get the function without inheriting the afterlife. The same is true for event-based ownership. Formal wear is a perfect example. People buy outfits for weddings, galas, holiday parties, one-time presentations, and milestone dinners, and then carry those garments through years of non-use because the purchase is already sunk and discarding it feels wasteful. But if the item belonged mainly to a moment, renting or borrowing would have matched the truth of the situation far better. The need was real, the permanence was not. Travel gear can be another trap. Luggage systems, travel accessories, camping equipment, ski gear, baby travel tools, beach wagons, coolers the size of furniture. If you travel in a particular way 3 times a year, maybe buying makes sense. If the purchase is built around a fantasy of how you might travel, access is often wiser than ownership. The object should be answering your calendar, not your mood. Not kitchen gadgets deserve their own trial in this conversation because they have probably seduced more respectable adults into clutter than almost any other category. The pattern is always persuasive. This slicer will make healthy eating easier. This ice cream machine will save money in the long run. This bread maker will become part of the weekend. This juicer will finally launch the healthier chapter. This specialty pan will inspire more cooking. And sometimes, the object does become a real member of the household. But often it performs once, maybe 3 times, then settles into the cabinet as a metallic reminder that buying and becoming are not the same thing. Borrow the appliance first. Borrow the bread machine from a friend. Rent the ice cream maker for a weekend if that is an option. Use the specialty tool in actual daily life, but not in the cinematic trailer playing in your head. The difference between those two realities is where a huge amount of unnecessary spending dies. There is also something psychologically brilliant about borrowing before buying. Borrowing removes ego from the transaction. When you buy, especially in certain categories, you are often buying more than function. You are buying identity, the owner of the machine, the host with the equipment, the outdoorsy person, the person who has the right gear, the adult with the proper setup. Ownership can flatter the self in ways access never quite does, and that is exactly why buying can become so deceptive. It lets the object carry emotional weight unrelated to actual usage. Borrowing strips that performance away. It asks a cleaner question. Do you actually want the use? No, or do you want the story of being the kind of person who owns the thing? That question ruins a lot of purchases for the best possible reason. Because the story is often what people are really paying for. They do not need the truck. They need the feeling of capability. They do not need the camera setup. They need the feeling of being creative and serious. They do not need the shelf of entertaining pieces. They need the feeling of being the kind of person whose life could host a certain atmosphere. Stories are powerful, but they are expensive when stored physically. This is where the midpoint of the whole subject reveals itself. Owning something is not just having access to it. Owning something means agreeing to manage its existence for as long as it remains with you. That is a bigger commitment than people admit when they are excited. Every object asks for a little territory, a little cleaning, a little protection, a little memory, a little future planning, a little decision-making when it breaks, when you move, when you stop using it, when it becomes obsolete, when it no longer fits the life it was bought for. Renting buys the function. Ownership buys the afterlife. Once you understand that sentence, an enormous number of consumer decisions get easier. You stop asking whether the object could be useful. You start asking whether you want to manage its afterlife. That shift alone can save you from years of clutter. It also makes the financial side brutally clear. Suppose a person buys 5 or 6 enthusiasm-driven items per year that each cost somewhere between $100 and $400. None of them feel life-changing alone. A machine for the patio, a gadget for the kitchen, a set of extra chairs, a hobby item, a seasonal accessory, a piece of equipment for one ambitious phase. In a single year, that can quietly become $1,000 to $2,000 of capital converted into stuff with low actual usage. Over a decade, the money gets big enough to be painful. Bigger still if you include the shelving, storage furniture, garage crowding, bigger apartment logic, and lost investment growth attached to all of it. That is what short-term excitement does when it hardens into long-term clutter. It steals money twice, once at checkout, again in the years afterward. The rent or borrow rule interrupts that theft before it gets started. It does it by changing the burden of proof. Instead of asking you to justify not buying, it asks the object to justify permanent ownership. That is a completely different power dynamic. And the standard can be very simple. If the need is temporary, occasional, experimental, seasonal, uncertain, or tied to a one-off event, rent or borrow first. If after using it you keep needing it, missing it, or reaching for it repeatedly, then buying becomes a calm decision instead of an excited one. If using it once was enough, then you just saved yourself money, space, and future annoyance. There is another hidden benefit here that matters more than it first appears. Borrowing and renting make you more honest about frequency. That frequency is everything in ownership decisions. People do not usually go broke because they bought one bad object. They create strain because too many low-frequency items gain permanent residence. The house becomes a storage facility for rare moments. The garage becomes a monument to once-a-year logic. Closets fill with objects that made sense only if a certain kind of life happened often enough to justify them. Frequency cuts through all of that. Will you use the thing weekly, monthly, seasonally, or only under a special combination of weather, mood, occasion, and motivation? If the answer is the last one, ownership should be treated with suspicion. A person may need a carpet cleaner this month. That does not mean they need to own one every month afterward. They may need a trailer this weekend. That does not mean they need to own a truck. They may need extra serving pieces for a holiday. That does not mean the cabinets need to absorb a permanent banquet identity. One of the smartest adults in any room is often not the one who owns the most solutions. It is the one who understands the difference between recurring need and temporary access. That sounds small, but it is actually a worldview. It says life does not need to be prepared for every possible scenario through personal ownership. It says community, rental markets, borrowing networks, and shared access can solve a great many needs without every household privately stockpiling every possible answer. It says, maturity is not measured by how many objects you can accumulate, but by how accurately you can tell which ones deserve permanent space. That worldview is quietly liberating. It makes your home lighter. It makes your spending slower and smarter. It makes you less vulnerable to the emotional seduction of imagined lifestyles. And it creates something modern consumer culture does not naturally encourage. Enough access, enough function, enough capability without endless ownership. This is where the rule starts becoming bigger than shopping. It becomes a philosophy of margin. Not just financial margin, though certainly that too. Spatial margin, mental margin, decision margin. The home has more room to breathe because you are no longer importing permanent objects for every temporary problem. Your future self has fewer things to maintain, move, sort, donate, or feel vaguely guilty about. You begin to notice that a large percentage of peace comes not from finally buying the right thing, but from not having to carry so many barely justified things through the years. Imagine two versions of the same life. In one, every new interest gets outfitted immediately. Every event gets purchased for. Every occasional need becomes a reason to acquire. The house slowly thickens. Closets grow tense. Storage furniture multiplies. Garages stop holding cars. Money keeps leaving in reasonable-looking chunks. Nothing appears extravagant, yet the home feels crowded and the finances feel oddly thin. In the other version, access comes first. Borrow for the trip. Rent the equipment for the weekend. Try the hobby before financing the identity. Use the specialized appliance before marrying it. The result is not deprivation. The result is precision. Fewer bad objects enter. More money remains liquid. Space stays functional. Purchases that do happen are better because they are chosen after evidence, not before it. That second life usually looks quieter. It is also often much richer. Go back to the man with the pressure washer. In one version, the machine lives in the garage for years because a Saturday feeling got turned into permanent ownership. In another version, he rents it for the day. The driveway still gets cleaned. The satisfaction still happens. The weekend still produces the small adult thrill of fixing something that looked neglected. But on Sunday evening, the machine leaves with the job. The garage remains a little emptier. The money stays mostly intact. No shelf gets claimed. No future move gets harder. No long afterlife begins. That is the entire point. The smartest purchase is often not a purchase at all. Sometimes it is temporary access. Sometimes it is borrowing from a neighbor, a friend, a local rental place, a shared tool library, or a service designed precisely because no sane household needs to own every object it occasionally touches. And sometimes it is the discovery that, after renting or borrowing the item once, you do not even want it as much as you thought. That may be the greatest financial victory of all. The object revealed its real size, real inconvenience, real frequency, real maintenance, real role in your life before you had to reorganize your home around it. Short-term excitement will always be persuasive. It is supposed to be. It is bright, immediate, cinematic. Ownership after the excitement, though, is ordinary. It is dusting, storing, remembering, moving, and explaining to yourself why the thing is still here. Rent or borrow before you buy, because temporary excitement should not automatically earn permanent square footage. Rent or borrow before you buy because access is often enough. Rent or borrow before you buy because a thing can be useful without being yours forever. And most of all, rent or borrow before you buy, because the cleanest way to prevent long-term clutter is to stop confusing a moment of wanting with a lifetime of owning.